I still remember the way my grandson laughed when he took my car keys right out of my hand. "Come on," Grandma Ethan said, grinning like I was a joke. "You're not going anywhere important anyway." Everyone at the table chuckled except me. I felt it, that quiet crack inside my chest. Hours later, he brought the car back like nothing happened. But when I opened the trunk, my hands started shaking. Because what I saw inside wasn't just trouble, it was something that should have never found its way back into my life. If this moment hit you in any way, I'd love for you to share it with me. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? And tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe stories like this deserve to be told. I didn't always feel like a stranger in my own family. There was a time before the silence, before the sideways glances, when my house was the place everyone came to. Sunday dinners, birthdays, even those quiet evenings when no one had anything to celebrate. They still showed up. Back then, I was mom. I was grandma. I was needed. Now I was tolerated. After my husband Richard passed away 6 years ago, something shifted. Not all at once. It was subtle at first. Lisa started insisting on helping me with things I had done perfectly fine on my own for decades. Paying bills, scheduling appointments, even driving. "You shouldn't be out alone so much." "Mom," she'd say, her voice soft but firm. "It's not safe. Not safe." I used to drive across 3 states to visit my sister without a second thought. I raised a child, managed a household, worked full-time, and somehow still found time to volunteer at the school library. But now, suddenly, I wasn't safe to drive to the grocery store. I didn't argue much. I had learned that arguing only made things worse. It made me sound defensive, emotional, fragile. And fragile, apparently, was the last thing I was allowed to fight against. But there was one thing I refused to give up: my car, a silver Buick LaCrosse. Nothing fancy, nothing new, but it was mine. Richard and I bought it together just 2 years before he died. I still remembered the way he ran his hand along the dashboard and said, "This one's going to take us on a lot of quiet drives, Amy." It did. After he was gone, that car became something else entirely. It wasn't just transportation, it was freedom. It was the last piece of a life where I still had control over where I went when I left and who I chose to see. Lisa didn't understand that. Or maybe she did and just didn't think it mattered. "Mom, you don't need to be driving across town just for coffee," she said, once standing in my kitchen with her arms crossed. "You can call me. I'll take you." "I don't want to call you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to go myself." She sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. It always ended that way. And then there was Ethan. If Lisa treated me like I was fading, Ethan treated me like I was already gone. He hadn't always been like that. When he was little, he used to climb into my lap and ask me to read the same book over and over again. He'd fall asleep with his head on my shoulder, his small hand wrapped around my fingers like I was the safest place in the world. But somewhere along the way, maybe around 15, maybe earlier, that boy disappeared. In his place was a tall, sharp-tongued teenager with a permanent smirk and a habit of looking at people like they were beneath him, especially me. "Hey, Grandma," he'd say, dragging the word out just enough to make it sting. "You still driving that antique? It runs just fine," I'd answer. "Yeah, well, so does a horse, technically." Lisa would laugh, not cruelly, not loudly, but enough. Enough for him to keep going. I told myself it was just a phase, that boys his age were like that, disrespectful, testing boundaries, pushing limits. But deep down, I knew something else was wrong. It wasn't just attitude. It was something harder, colder. And I started noticing little things: cash disappearing from Lisa's purse, Ethan coming home at odd hours, phone calls he'd take outside, his voice low and tense. Once I saw a bruise on his knuckles, fresh swollen. When I asked about it, he shrugged. "Basketball," he said. He didn't play basketball. Lisa didn't press. She never pressed. "It's just boys being boys," she'd say. "You worry too much, Mom." Maybe I did. But worry has a way of growing when no one else is willing to look at the truth. That Sunday, the day everything began to unravel, we had a small family barbecue in Lisa's backyard. Nothing fancy, just burgers, potato salad, and the kind of conversation that never quite went anywhere. Sophie sat quietly at the edge of the table, picking at her food. She was different from her brother always had been. Softer, observant, the kind of child who noticed everything but rarely spoke about it. I caught her watching Ethan more than once that afternoon. Not with admiration, with concern. Ethan, on the other hand, was louder than usual, restless. Checking his phone every few minutes. Laughing too hard at things that weren't that funny. And then it happened. I had just stood up to bring my plate inside when I felt a sudden lightness in my hand. I looked down. My keys were gone. Ethan stood a few feet away, twirling them around his finger like it was some kind of party trick. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm but firm, "give those back." He tilted his head, smiling. "Relax, Grandma. I'm just borrowing it." "You're not borrowing anything," I replied. "That's my car." "Oh, come on." He laughed, glancing around at the others like he was expecting applause. "You're not going anywhere important today, or ever really." A few people chuckled. Not loudly, but enough. I felt my face grow warm, my chest tightening in a way I couldn't quite control. "Give me the keys," I said again. Lisa sighed from her seat. "Mom let it go. He just needs to run an errand. Then he can use your car," I snapped before I could stop myself. That surprised her. It surprised me too. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly amused now. "Wow," he said. "Didn't know you had that in you." Ethan Lisa started, but he was already backing away, still smiling. "I'll bring it back," he said casually. "Try not to stress yourself out, okay?" And just like that, he was gone. The sound of my engine starting, the one Richard and I had chosen together, echoed in my ears as he drove off like it belonged to him. No one said anything for a moment. Then Lisa stood up and brushed her hands off. "You didn't have to make a scene," she muttered. "A scene." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in my eyes. "It's my car," I said quietly. "And he's your grandson," she replied, as if that explained everything. Maybe to her it did. But as I sat back down, staring at the empty space where my keys had been just moments before, I felt something settle deep inside me. Something heavy. Something final. Because it wasn't just about the car. It was about respect. And somewhere along the way, I had lost it. From my daughter. From my grandson. Maybe even from myself. That afternoon dragged on, but I barely heard anything anyone said. My mind kept circling back to the same thought over and over again. Why did he need my car so badly? And why did it feel like this wasn't the first time he'd taken something from me? Without asking. By the time I got home that evening, the sun had already dipped low in the sky. My driveway looked emptier than usual, quieter. I stood there for a moment, keys, or what was left of them, heavy in my hand, listening to the silence. Waiting. I told myself I was overreacting, that he'd be back soon, that this would all seem ridiculous in the morning. But something in my chest wouldn't settle. Something told me this wasn't just a careless mistake. It was the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face, and I had no idea how right that feeling would turn out to be. Ethan didn't come back that night. At first, I told myself it wasn't unusual. 19-year-old boys didn't live by anyone else's clock. They came and went as they pleased, answered messages when it suited them, and expected the world to adjust accordingly. But this felt different. By 10 o'clock, I had already checked my phone more times than I could count. No missed calls, no messages, nothing from Lisa either, which somehow made it worse. By midnight, the house felt too quiet. I sat in my living room with the television on, though I couldn't tell you what was playing. The sound filled the space, but not the unease that had settled deep in my chest. I kept thinking about the way Ethan had looked before he left. Too casual, too confident, like he knew something I didn't. Around 1:30 in the morning, I finally heard it, the low familiar hum of my engine, pulling into the driveway. Relief hit me first, sharp and immediate, followed quickly by something else. Dread. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff, my heart beating just a little too fast as I walked toward the front door. I didn't rush, I didn't call out. I just watched through the narrow glass panel as the headlights cut through the darkness and then went out. The driver's door opened. Ethan stepped out. Even from a distance, I could tell something was off. His movements weren't as loose as usual. There was a tension in the way he stood, like his body was coiled too tight under the surface. He looked around once quick sharp before shutting the door a little too hard. Then he glanced toward the house. For a brief second, our eyes almost met through the glass, but he looked away first. That alone made my stomach turn. Ethan never looked away. He walked up the driveway, hands shoved deep into his pockets, and let himself in like nothing had happened. "Oh," he said when he saw me standing there, "you're still up." "I could say the same to you," I replied. He shrugged, already moving past me. "Lost track of time. You had my car." "Yeah," he said casually, "and I brought it back." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a simple statement like returning something he barely acknowledged borrowing. "Ethan," I said, turning to face him, "what were you doing out there?" He paused, but only for a second. "Just hanging out," he said. Why I studied his face. There was something there. Something just beneath the surface, but it was gone before I could fully grasp it. "Because you didn't answer your phone," I said, "and you didn't ask to take my car in the first place." He let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Seriously, we're doing this right now." "Yes," I said firmly. "We are." He rolled his eyes, dragging a hand through his hair. "I said I'd bring it back, didn't I?" "You're acting like I stole it or something." The word hung in the air between us. Stole. I felt something tighten in my chest again, but I pushed it down. "This isn't about the car," I said quietly. "It's about respect." He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a split second I saw it. Not defiance, not arrogance. Fear. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by that familiar smirk. "Respect goes both ways, Grandma," he said. Then he walked past me and disappeared down the hallway. A door slammed a moment later. I stood there for a long time after that, staring at nothing, listening to the echo of that word in my mind. Stole. Maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe it was something deeper, something I couldn't quite name yet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't meant it as a joke. Eventually, I turned off the lights and went to bed, though sleep didn't come easy. Every little sound in the house seemed louder than usual. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboards as the house settled into the night. At some point, I must have drifted off, but not for long, because when I woke up, it was still dark, and something felt wrong. I lay there for a moment listening. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard it, a soft thud. Not loud, not enough to alarm anyone else, but enough. I sat up slowly, my heart beginning to race. Another sound followed, a faint shift of weight, a subtle scrape like something being moved. It was coming from outside, from the direction of the driveway. For a brief moment I considered staying in bed, telling myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But I had lived long enough to know the difference between imagination and instinct, and my instincts were screaming at me. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make too much noise, and reached for my robe. My hands felt colder than they should have as I tied it around my waist. Step by step, I made my way through the hallway. The house felt different at night, larger, darker. Every shadow seemed deeper, every corner holding something unseen. When I reached the front door, I didn't open it right away. I stood there listening. Nothing. Just silence. Slowly, I leaned toward the glass panel and looked outside. The driveway was still. The car sat exactly where Ethan had left it. No movement, no figures in the shadows. I exhaled my breath, fogging slightly against the glass. Maybe I was overreacting after all. Maybe another sound. This time I knew exactly where it came from. The back of the car, the trunk. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the vehicle like it might suddenly come to life. The trunk was closed, but I had heard something. I was sure of it. 100 thoughts raced through my mind all at once. An animal. Something loose shifting inside, or something else. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. This was ridiculous, I told myself. It was just a car. My car. There was nothing inside that I didn't already know about. Except, I didn't know what Ethan had put in there. That thought changed everything. Slowly, I reached for the door handle and stepped outside. The night air was colder than I expected, biting against my skin as I moved down the small path toward the driveway. Each step felt heavier than the last. The closer I got, the stronger that uneasy feeling became, like I was walking towards something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. I stopped a few feet from the car, listened again. Nothing. Just the distant hum of traffic and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. I almost turned back, almost convinced myself to wait until morning, but something inside me refused. If there was something in that trunk, I needed to know. Now, not later. Now. I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out the spare key Ethan had left on the kitchen counter. My fingers trembled slightly as I pressed the button. Click. The car unlocked with a soft sound that seemed too loud in the stillness of the night. I walked around to the back, my breath shallow, my heartbeat loud in my ears. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the trunk. This was the last second before everything changed. I didn't know that yet, but I felt it. With a slow, deliberate motion, I reached out and lifted the trunk. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Shapes, dark, uneven. A bag, clothes, something metallic catching the faint light. Then my eyes adjusted, and the details came into focus. A dirty duffel bag, half unzipped. An old jacket, stiff in places where something had dried into the fabric. A stack of cash bundled together with rubber bands. A shattered phone, and beneath it all, a small metal box. Worn, scratched, familiar. My breath caught in my throat as I leaned closer, because even in the dim light I could see it clearly. The engraving, RG, Richard Graham, my husband's initials. My hand flew to my mouth as a cold wave of realization crashed over me. This wasn't random. This wasn't just trouble. This was something that had been buried, something that had found its way back, and somehow, my grandson was standing right in the middle of it. I don't remember how long I stood there staring into the trunk. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. Time has a way of slipping when your entire world tilts without warning. The night air felt colder, now sharper against my skin, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on that metal box, on those two simple letters engraved into its surface. R.G. Richard Graham, my husband's initials. For a moment, I convinced myself it had to be a coincidence, that there were other Richard Grahams in the world, that initials didn't mean anything on their own. But deep down, I knew better. I had seen that box before, years ago, before everything changed. My hand trembled as I reached into the trunk. I hesitated just inches above the edge, my fingers hovering as if the air itself had turned heavy. I wasn't just opening a box. I was opening something I had buried a long time ago, something I had chosen not to question, but the choice had been taken from me now. Slowly, I lifted the box out of the trunk. It was heavier than I remembered, or maybe I was just weaker than I used to be. Either way, the weight of it settled into my palms like something alive, like it carried more than just metal and paper. I glanced once over my shoulder, instinctively checking the dark windows of the house. Everything was still. No movement, no sign that anyone was watching. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I pushed that thought aside. One thing at a time, Amy. I set the box down carefully on the trunk's edge and opened it. The hinges creaked softly, the sound slicing through the silence like a warning. Inside, everything was exactly where it had been the last time I saw it, which was impossible. A small brass key, a folded stack of old receipts, a few documents yellowed at the edges, and a letter. My breath caught. The letter. I remembered that letter. Richard had written it just days before he died. I had found it tucked into his desk drawer after the funeral. I hadn't opened it back then, not right away. Something about it had felt deliberate, like he had left it there for a reason. When I finally did read it, it didn't make much sense, not at the time. Now, as I stared at it again, I realized something that made my stomach twist. This wasn't the same letter. It looked identical at first glance, the same handwriting, the same paper, but when I reached down and touched it, I felt it immediately. This one had never been opened. My hands went cold. I picked it up slowly, turning it over, still sealed. My mind raced. That wasn't possible. I had read that letter. I remembered it clearly, the way Richard's handwriting slanted slightly when he was tired, the way he pressed harder on certain words. So how could there be another one, a copy number? Richard wasn't the kind of man who made copies of personal letters. which meant this was a different letter, a second one he had never given me. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. For a moment I considered putting it back, closing the box, pretending none of this was happening. But that part of me, the part that had spent years avoiding uncomfortable truths, was quieter now, weaker, because something in me had already shifted. I slid my finger under the edge of the envelope and broke the seal. The paper inside was crisp as I unfolded it, and then I read, Amy. If you're reading this, then something has already gone wrong. I didn't want to involve you in this. I tried to handle it on my own, but I'm starting to realize that might not be possible anymore. There are things happening at the garage that don't add up. Money that's being moved in ways it shouldn't be. Records that don't match what we're being told. I've asked questions. Too many, apparently. I don't know who I can trust anymore. There are names connected to this that go beyond the garage. People who have influence, who don't want this exposed. If anything happens to me, I need you to take this box and go to someone you trust. Not the company. Not anyone connected to them, someone outside. Because if they realize what I know, they won't stop at me. And Amy, if it comes to it, don't try to fix this alone. Protect yourself. Protect our family. I love you. Richard. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had to blink several times before I could see clearly again. Protect our family. A bitter, hollow feeling spread through my chest. I had spent years believing Richard's death was an accident, a tragic, unfortunate accident, but still just that. I had accepted it, grieved it, moved on in the only way I knew how. But now I wasn't so sure. I lowered the letter slowly, my hands shaking. The silence around me felt heavier than before, like the world itself was holding its breath, and then all at once the pieces began to shift. The box, the documents, the fact that it had ended up in my car of all places. Ethan. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the past. This was happening now. I forced myself to look back into the trunk. The duffel bag, the jacket, the money, the broken phone. None of it made sense on its own. But together it painted a picture I wasn't ready to fully understand. I stepped back from the car, my mind racing. How had Ethan gotten this? Why had he taken it? And more importantly, did he even know what he was carrying? A sudden thought hit me so hard I had to grab onto the edge of the trunk to steady myself. What if he did? What if that was why he had looked at me the way he did earlier? That brief flash of something beneath his usual arrogance. Fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from being caught doing something wrong. Something deeper, something more dangerous. I closed the box quickly, my heart pounding. This wasn't something I could confront him about in the middle of the night. Not like this. I needed to think. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I said anything. Because if Richard had been right, if there were people involved who didn't want the truth to come out, then I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not now, not when this had already gone further than it ever should have. I gathered the contents of the trunk carefully. The box, the phone, the cash, the jacket, everything. I didn't leave a single piece behind. Then I closed the trunk and locked the car. The click echoing louder than it should have in the quiet night. As I walked back toward the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just in the situation, but in me. For years I had stayed quiet. I had let things go. I had chosen peace over confrontation, comfort over truth, but standing there in the darkness, holding the pieces of a past I never fully understood, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. Silence hadn't protected my family. It had only delayed the moment when everything would come crashing down, and now that moment was here, waiting. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and leaned against it for just a second longer than necessary. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. Older, tired, but not broken. Not anymore. Because whatever this was, whatever Richard had tried to warn me about, I wasn't going to look away this time, even if it meant facing things I had spent years trying to forget. Even if it meant discovering that the life I thought I knew had been built on something far more fragile than I ever imagined, And as I carried that metal box into the quiet of my living room, one thought settled into place with a clarity that sent a chill down my spine. This didn't end with Richard. It had only just begun. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I lay in bed with the lights off, eyes closed, breathing slow like I used to do when I couldn't quiet my thoughts, but it didn't work. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that box. That letter, Richard's handwriting, staring back at me like a voice from the past I had ignored for far too long. By morning, I had made a decision. If there was anyone who could help me understand what I was looking at, it was Harold Jenkins. I hadn't spoken to Harold in years, not because of anything personal, we had always been on good terms, but because after Richard died, everything connected to the garage slowly disappeared from my life. The people, the stories, the routines. All of it faded into something I didn't revisit. Until now. I waited until the sun was fully up before calling him. My hands were steadier than the night before, but my voice still carried a weight I couldn't hide. "Amy," he said when he picked up surprise clear in his tone. "It's been a while." "It has," I replied. I need to talk to you. About Richard." There was a pause on the other end, long enough for me to know he understood this wasn't a casual conversation. "I can be at my shop in an hour," he said quietly. "You still remember where it is, I do. The drive there felt different than it used to. Every street held a memory. Every turn reminded me of something I had tried to move past. Richard and I had driven these roads countless times, laughing, arguing, sitting in comfortable silence. Back then, everything felt simple. Now nothing did. Harold's shop was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing it through a different lens. The faded sign above the door, the cracked pavement in the lot, the smell of oil and metal that greeted me as soon as I stepped inside, it all felt heavier, like it carried secrets. Harold was already there, standing near the back with a rag in his hand. He looked older, of course. We all were. But there was something else in his expression when he saw me. Concern. "Amy," he said, walking over. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the metal box. The moment his eyes landed on it, everything changed. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low and tight. "That's what I need you to tell me," I replied. "Because it showed up in the trunk of my car last night." He stared at me for a long second, then back at the box. "Open it," he said. I already did. Open it again. There was something in his tone, something urgent that made me comply without questioning. I set the box down on the workbench between us and lifted the lid. Harold leaned in his eyes, scanning the contents quickly. The key, the receipts, the documents, and then the letter. He let out a slow breath like something inside him had just been confirmed. "I was afraid of this," he muttered. "Afraid of what I asked, my voice sharper than I intended." He looked at me, then really looked at me. "You remember the accident," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," I replied. "Of course I do. Richard had been working late that night." A routine shift. Nothing unusual. He never came home. They said it was equipment failure, a malfunction, something no one could have predicted. I had believed them. I had needed to believe them. "That wasn't the whole story," Harold said quietly. My chest tightened. "I figured that much," I replied. "Start talking, Harold." He ran a hand over his face like he was trying to decide how much to say. Richard started asking questions a few months before it happened. He began. About money. About records that didn't match. At first it seemed like small stuff, accounting errors maybe, but the deeper he looked, the worse it got. "How bad?" I asked. Harold hesitated. "Bad enough that people started noticing he was looking," he said. A chill ran through me. "People I repeated. Not just the guys at the garage," he clarified. "Bigger than that. The garage was just one piece of it." I felt the ground shift beneath me again. What kind of piece? Harold exhaled slowly. "Money laundering," he said. "Insurance fraud. Compensation claims being manipulated. Workers getting paid less than they were owed, while someone else pocketed the difference." My stomach turned. "And Richard found out—" "Not just found out," Harold said. "He started collecting proof." My eyes drifted down to the documents in the box. "That's what this is," I whispered. He nodded. Part of it, he said, not all, but enough to cause problems for the wrong people. And you think that's why I couldn't finish the sentence. Harold didn't need me to. I think he got too close, he said. The words hung in the air between us. Too close. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, but I forced myself to stay focused. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. His expression hardened slightly. You think I didn't wanna? He shot back. After it happened, everything got locked down tight. Records disappeared. People stopped talking. And the ones who didn't, he trailed off. I pressed. They left, he said. Or they learned to keep their heads down. Silence settled between us, heavy, uncomfortable. I thought it was over, Harold added quietly. After all these years, I thought whatever Richard found died with him. I swallowed hard. It didn't, I said. He looked at me again. No, he agreed. It didn't. I took a breath, steadying myself. There's more, I said. This wasn't just sitting somewhere waiting to be found. It was in my car, in my trunk. Harold frowned. How? My grandson, I said, Ethan. The name seemed to mean nothing to him at first. But then something clicked. Bennett, he asked. Lisa's boy, yes. Harold leaned back, slightly processing. That doesn't make sense, he said. Why would he? There's more, I cut in. There was a name in there, on one of the papers. His eyes sharpened. What name? Marcus Hale. The reaction was immediate. Harold's jaw tightened, his posture stiffening. Where did you see that name? He demanded. In the bag, I said. Why? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked away like he was weighing something. Harold, I said firmly. What aren't you telling me? He let out a slow breath. Marcus Hale. His family's been around here a long time, he said carefully. Not always on the right side of things. What does that mean? It means if your grandson is mixed up with him. He shook his head. This isn't just about old records anymore. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying, Harold replied, his voice low, that whatever Richard uncovered back then, it didn't just disappear. It changed hands. It evolved. My grip on the edge of the workbench tightened. And now Ethan is involved, I said. Harold nodded grimly. And that makes this a whole lot more dangerous than you think. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting that sink in. When I opened them again, the world felt different. Sharper, more defined. Because this wasn't just about understanding the past anymore. It was about protecting the future. My family, even if they didn't realize it. Then I need to know everything, I said. My voice steady despite the storm building inside me. No more half-truths, no more guessing. Harold studied me for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. All right, he said, but if we're doing this, you need to understand something first. When he met my gaze, his expression serious. Once you start pulling on this thread, Amy, there's no putting it back. A quiet resolve settled into my chest. I know, I said. And for the first time since this all began, I meant it. By the time I left Harold's shop, the sky had turned a dull gray, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it should. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Richard. The man I had loved for over 40 years. The man I had buried. The man I thought I understood. And now, I wasn't sure I had ever truly known the last part of his life. The letter, the documents, the secrets he had been carrying, all of that alone. Protecting me, he said. Protecting our family. A bitter thought crept in. And look where that got us. I exhaled slowly and started the car. There was no turning back now. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I could already feel it. Tension. It hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lisa's car was parked outside. So was Ethan's. I wasn't surprised. If anything, I had expected this. I stepped out of the car, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the house with a calm I didn't entirely feel. The front door was unlocked. Inside voices. Raised. You had no right. Lisa's voice cut through the hallway before I even closed the door behind me. I didn't touch anything that wasn't already in her car, Ethan snapped back. I paused for a brief second, then I walked in. They were both in the living room. Lisa stood near the couch, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face flushed with anger. Ethan was pacing back and forth, his movements sharp, restless. His jaw was clenched, his hands flexing at his sides like he was barely holding himself together. And then they both saw me. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Well, Lisa said, her voice tight. "There you are." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I set my bag down carefully on the table and looked at them both. "I was out," I said calmly. "Something you might understand if you didn't treat my car like it belonged to everyone but me." Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, here we go again." "No," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't the same conversation we had yesterday." Something in my tone must have landed differently, because he stopped pacing. Really looked at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means," I replied, taking a step closer, "that I know about what you put in my trunk." His reaction was instant, too instant. His shoulders stiffened, his eyes flashing with something that wasn't just irritation anymore. It was fear. "Grandma, I don't know what you—" "Don't lie to me," I cut in. The room went still. Lisa looked between us, confusion creeping into her expression. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I didn't take my eyes off Ethan. "You took my car," I said slowly, "and you brought it back with things in it that do not belong to me, things that you clearly don't want anyone asking about." Ethan swallowed, his gaze flickering for just a second. Then the mask came back. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he said. "It's just some stuff." "Some stuff," I repeated, my voice rising slightly despite myself. "A bag of cash is some stuff. A broken phone. A jacket with—" I stopped. I hadn't meant to say that much, but it was too late. Lisa's eyes widened. A jacket with what she demanded. Ethan shot me a look, sharp warning. "Nothing," he said quickly. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." "I know exactly what I saw," I snapped. That did it. Whatever fragile control Ethan had been holding on to snapped. "Then maybe you shouldn't have been digging through things that aren't yours," he shot back. "Excuse me," I said, stunned. "It wasn't your business," he continued, his voice louder, now more desperate. "You shouldn't have opened it." "It was in my car," I fired back. "Everything in that trunk is my business." Ethan, Lisa stepped forward, her voice sharp with alarm now. "What is she talking about?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, breathing harder than before, his eyes darting between us. For the first time, he looked like exactly what he was. Not a confident young man, not someone in control, but a scared boy who had gone too far. "I asked you a question," Lisa pressed. "What is going on?" Still nothing, silence stretched. "And then I need that stuff back." Ethan's voice was lower now, quieter, but far more serious than anything he had said before. A chill ran through me. Why, I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because it's not mine," he said, "and it's not yours either." "That much is obvious," I replied. "So whose is it?" He hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. "Ethan," I said, my voice softening just slightly, "who are you involved with?" Lisa turned to him fully now, her anger shifting into something closer to fear. "Answer her," she said. He shook his head. "I can't." "You can," I insisted, "and you will." His eyes met mine, and this time there was no smirk, no attitude, just something raw. "If I tell you." He said slowly, "You're not gonna like it." "I don't like it already," I replied. Another pause. Then he let out a breath like he was giving up a fight he couldn't win. "It's Marcus," he said. The name hit the air like a crack. Lisa frowned. "Marcus who?" But I already knew. "Marcus Hale," I said. Ethan's head snapped toward me. "How do you know that name?" I ignored the question. "What does he want with you?" I asked. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing again, but this time it wasn't anger driving him. It was panic. "It started a few months ago," he said. "Just small stuff, running errands, dropping things off, nothing serious." "That's what they all say," I muttered. He shot me a look, but didn't argue. "I didn't know who he really was at first," he continued. "I thought he was just some guy with connections, someone who could get me money." Lisa's face fell. "Money," she whispered. Ethan didn't look at her. "I needed it," he said, for what she asked. Still, he didn't answer, but I could see it. The shame, the regret. And then I prompted. "And then it wasn't optional anymore," he said quietly. The room seemed to shrink around us. "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. Ethan stopped pacing, looked at both of us, And for the first time since this began, he told the truth without hiding behind anything. I mean, he said his voice barely above a whisper that once you're in, you don't just walk away. A cold silence followed. Because we all understood what that meant. He wasn't just involved, he was trapped. And the things in my trunk, I asked. His eyes flickered again. That's part of it, he said. Stuff he told me to move. Said it was safer if it didn't stay in one place too long. Safer for who I demanded. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The answer was obvious. Not for him, not for us, for Marcus. I felt something shift inside me then. Not fear, not confusion, something harder, colder. Because this wasn't just about Ethan making bad choices anymore. This was about someone using him, manipulating him, and dragging my family into something far bigger than any of us had realized. You're done with him, I said firmly. Ethan let out a hollow laugh. You think it's that easy? I don't care how easy it is, I replied. You're done. His expression darkened. You don't get it, he said. He's not just going to let me walk away. Then we make sure he doesn't have a choice. The words came out before I could stop them. But once they were there, I didn't take them back. Because deep down I knew something Ethan didn't. This wasn't just his fight. It never was. It started long before him. With Richard, with that garage, with the secrets that had been buried instead of exposed. And now those secrets had come back. Through my grandson, through my car, through that box. I looked at Ethan. Really looked at him and saw the truth clearly for the first time. He wasn't just the problem. He was the warning. And if I didn't act now, this wouldn't stop with him. That night, after the argument burned itself out into a strained, uneasy silence, no one slept well. Lisa retreated to the guest room, claiming she needed space to think, though I could hear her pacing long after the lights went out. Ethan shut himself in his old bedroom, the door locked, music playing low. Too low to be a distraction, too loud to be ignored. And me. I sat in the living room, the metal box resting on the coffee table in front of me like a quiet, unblinking witness. Every now and then I would glance at it as if expecting it to move on its own, to open, to reveal something new I hadn't seen before, but it stayed exactly as it was. Still, heavy, unavoidable. Around midnight, I finally stood up, my body stiff from sitting too long, and carried the box into the hallway closet. Not to hide it, at least not entirely, but to put some distance between myself and the weight of it. I needed to think, and I needed quiet. But quiet has a way of inviting thoughts you're not ready for. I kept replaying everything Ethan had said. Marcus, the errands, the money, the way his voice had dropped when he said, "You don't just walk away." That wasn't teenage exaggeration. That was fear, real fear. And beneath it all, something else lingered. That look he gave me when I mentioned the contents of the trunk. Not just panic, recognition. Like he knew exactly what he had been carrying and exactly how dangerous it was. I didn't realize I had dozed off in the chair until a soft knock startled me awake. I blinked, disoriented for a moment, then turned toward the hallway. Another knock. Lighter this time. Amy, a small voice, whispered, "Sophie." I stood up slowly and walked over, opening the door just enough to see her standing there in the dim light. She looked smaller than usual, fragile. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Of course," I said, gently stepping aside. She slipped into the living room, glancing over her shoulder before I closed the door behind her. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, twisting the sleeve of her sweatshirt between her fingers. "Sophie," I said softly, "what's wrong?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away again. I heard everything she said quietly. I nodded. "I figured you might have." Another pause. Then she took a deep breath. "There's more," she said. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated, like she was weighing whether to say it out loud. Then finally, "Ethan didn't tell you everything." I felt a chill run through me. "Okay," I said carefully. "Then you tell me." She swallowed hard. "It started before the errands," she said, "before the money." "How long?" I asked. "A few months," she replied. "Maybe longer. I'm not sure." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "He met Marcus through someone at school," she said. At first it was just parties, hanging out. Marcus had connections. People liked being around him. That didn't surprise me. Men like Marcus always had a way of pulling people in before revealing what they really were. Then Ethan started doing favors, Sophie continued. Small things, delivering packages, picking things up. He said it was easy money. And you believed him, I asked. She shook her head immediately. No, she said, but Mom did. That stung. Not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. She didn't want to see it, Sophie added quietly. She thought if she ignored it, it would go away. Silence settled between us again. Heavy, familiar. What changed? I asked after a moment. Sophie's grip tightened on her sleeve. Ethan found something, she said. My breath caught. The box, I asked. She nodded. He went to the old garage, she explained. The one Grandpa used to work at. It's been closed for years, but people still go there sometimes. Parties, stuff like that. I felt a flicker of anger at that. That place should have been left alone, untouched. But of course, it hadn't been. And he found the box there, I asked. Yes, she said, hidden behind some old equipment. He didn't even know what it was at first. He just thought it might be worth something. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. To him, it had just been another opportunity, another shortcut. He brought it to Marcus, she continued, thinking he could sell it or something. And Marcus knew what it was, I said. It wasn't a question. Sophie nodded slowly. He didn't say it directly, she said, but everything changed after that. How Ethan stopped acting like it was a joke, she said. He got quiet, nervous. He started locking his door, taking calls outside, and Marcus. She hesitated. What about Marcus, I pressed. He started coming around more, she said. Not here, but nearby, watching, waiting. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Watching who I asked. Sophie looked at me then. Ethan, she said. And you. My heart skipped. Me? She nodded. He asked about you, she said, about your car, your routine, when you were home, when you weren't. A sharp, icy fear shot through me, and Ethan told him I asked. Her silence was answer enough. I turned away, trying to steady myself. This was worse than I thought. Much worse. He didn't mean to put you in danger, Sophie said quickly, stepping closer. He didn't know how to get out. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I saw the truth in her eyes. Not just fear, but compassion. For her brother. Even now. Why are you telling me this? I asked softly. She hesitated, then said something that hit me harder than anything else that night. Because you're the only one who's actually doing something. The words settled deep, heavy, real. I had spent so long being told to step back, to let things go, to not make trouble. And now here was this child, this quiet, observant girl telling me that stepping forward was the only thing that mattered. What about the phone? I asked after a moment. The one in the trunk. Do you know anything about that? Sophie nodded slowly. Ethan found it with the box, she said. He said there was something on it. Something important. What kind of something? She hesitated again, then whispered, a recording. My pulse quickened. Of what I don't know exactly, she admitted. He wouldn't let me hear it, but I heard part of it once. And her voice dropped even lower. There were voices, she said, arguing, and then something else. What? She met my eyes, her expression serious. Grandpa's name. Everything inside me went still. For a moment I couldn't breathe, because that confirmed it. This wasn't just about money or records or old secrets buried in dusty boxes. This was about the truth, about what really happened to Richard. And now, that truth was sitting in my house, in pieces, in fragments, waiting to be put together. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Does Ethan still have access to that phone? I asked. Sophie shook her head. No, she said. He said it was too dangerous. That if Marcus got it, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I nodded. Okay, I said quietly. You did the right thing coming to me. She let out a small breath like she had been holding it in for too long. Are we going to be okay? She asked. The question hit me harder than anything else, because for the first time since this began, I didn't have a simple answer, but I also knew one thing for certain. Doing nothing was no longer an option. I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We're going to face this," I said. "Together." And as I said it, I realized something. This wasn't just about uncovering the past anymore. It was about protecting the future, no matter what it cost. I didn't wait until morning. Somewhere between Sophie's trembling voice and the silence that followed, something inside me made the decision for me. Waiting had cost us too much already. Years of not asking questions, years of accepting explanations that were easier to live with than the truth. Not this time. "Get your jacket," I told Sophie softly. "We're going for a short drive." She blinked at me, surprised. "Now, yes, now." There was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She nodded and disappeared down the hallway. I moved quickly, grabbing my purse and the small metal box, then hesitated before adding the broken phone. If there really was something on it, something tied to Richard, I wasn't leaving it behind. Not again. Within minutes, we were out the door. The night air was colder than before, sharper as if the world itself knew something was shifting. Sophie slid into the passenger seat quietly, pulling her jacket tighter around her. I started the engine, the familiar hum grounding me just enough to focus. "Where are we going?" she asked as I backed out of the driveway. "To someone who can help us understand what we're dealing with," I said. I didn't elaborate, but I knew exactly who I was thinking of. Officer Daniel Brooks. Daniel had been on the force for decades. He had known Richard not closely, but enough. Enough to respect him, enough to remember him, and more importantly, he was someone outside of whatever this was, someone Richard would have trusted. The drive was quiet at first. The roads were mostly empty, the streetlights casting long, pale shadows across the pavement. Every now and then, Sophie would glance out the window, her expression unreadable. I could feel her fear, but beneath it, something else. Hope. That scared me more than anything, because hope, when misplaced, had a way of breaking people. We pulled up in front of Daniel's house just after midnight. A modest place, well kept, with a single light still on in the front room. I parked at the curb and sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. This was it. Once I stepped out of this car, things would start moving in a way I couldn't control. I looked over at Sophie. "You stay close to me," I said. She nodded. We walked up to the door together and I knocked. It didn't take long. The door opened and Daniel stood there looking exactly as I remembered. Older perhaps, a little more tired, but still steady. "Amy," he said, clearly surprised. "Everything okay?" "No," I replied honestly. "It's not. I need your help." He took one look at my face, then at Sophie beside me, and stepped aside without another question. "Come in." The warmth inside hit me immediately, but it did nothing to ease the tension in my chest. Sophie stayed close as we followed Daniel into the living room. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door behind us. I didn't waste time. I set the metal box on his coffee table. At first, he just looked at it. Then something shifted in his expression. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. The question sent a chill through me. "You recognize it," I said. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, crouching slightly as if the box might vanish if he moved too quickly. "I haven't seen this in a long time," he said. "How long I pressed?" He glanced up at me. "Since your husband's case," he said. The word hit me like a physical blow. "Case," I repeated. Daniel exhaled slowly, straightening up. It wasn't officially called that, he clarified. Not on paper, but some of us, we had questions. My pulse quickened. What kind of questions? The kind that didn't have answers we could prove, he said. Not back then. Sophie shifted beside me, but I barely noticed. "Daniel." I said, my voice steady, despite the storm building inside me. "I need you to look at something." I opened the box. His eyes moved quickly over the contents, taking everything in: the documents, the receipts, the key, and finally the letter. He picked it up, carefully scanning the page. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of paper. When he finished, he set it down slowly. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "In the trunk of my car," I said. His head snapped up. "What?" "My grandson." I continued. He took my car, brought it back with all of this inside. Daniel stared at me for a moment, processing. "Does he know what this is?" he asked. "I don't think he understands all of it," I said, "but he knows enough to be scared." Daniel nodded grimly. That makes sense. I reached into my purse and pulled out the broken phone. There's more, I said. We think there's a recording on this. He took the phone, turning it over in his hands. It's damaged, he said. I know I replied, but Sophie heard part of it. Daniel looked at her. What did you hear? He asked gently. Sophie hesitated, then spoke. Voices, she said, arguing, and they said my grandpa's name. Daniel's expression darkened. He looked back at the phone. If there's something on here, he said slowly, it could change things. Change what I asked. He met my eyes. Everything. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. Can you get the data off it? I asked. He nodded. I know someone who can, he said, but it's going to take time. We don't have time, I said. The people connected to this, they're still around. They're watching. Daniel didn't look surprised. Marcus Hale, he said. It wasn't a question. My stomach dropped. You know him. I know of him, Daniel replied. His family's been on our radar for years. Nothing ever sticks. Not enough evidence, not enough cooperation. He's using my grandson, I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's what they do, he said. They find someone young, someone desperate, someone who thinks they're just making quick money, and then they pull them in deeper. And if they try to get out, I asked. He didn't answer immediately, but I already knew. It doesn't end well, he said finally. Silence filled the room again. Sophie shifted closer to me, her hand brushing against mine. I took it, holding on tightly. What do we do? She asked softly. Daniel looked at both of us. We move carefully, he said. No sudden moves, no confronting anyone directly. And most importantly, he paused. We don't let them know what we have. I nodded. That won't be a problem, I said. They already tried to break into my house. That got his attention. When he asked sharply, Tonight, I said, while I was out, his expression hardened. Then we're already behind, he muttered. A cold wave of realization washed over me. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. This was about staying one step ahead. Daniel, I said, my voice steady, if we do this, if we go forward, I need to know something. He looked at me. Can we actually win this? The question hung there. Simple, but loaded with everything we stood to lose. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the box, at the letter, at the pieces of a story that had been buried for years. Then he looked back at me. If what's on this phone matches what's in those documents, he said slowly, then yes. A pause. We have a chance. Not a guarantee, not a promise. A chance, and somehow, that was enough. I tightened my grip on Sophie's hand, because for the first time since this began, I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was choosing to fight. Daniel didn't let us stay long. Go home, he said, after making a few calls I wasn't allowed to hear. Lock your doors, keep your phones on, and don't talk about this with anyone else, not yet. I wanted to argue. Every instinct in me said staying close to him would be safer, but I could see it in his eyes. This was a line we couldn't cross too quickly. All right, I said, but call me the moment you have anything. You'll be the first, he assured me. Sophie and I drove back in silence. The sky had begun to lighten just slightly, that early gray blue that comes before dawn. It should have felt calming. It didn't. Every car that passed made my chest tighten. Every shadow felt like it was watching. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I was already bracing myself. Something wasn't right. I could feel it before I even turned off the engine. The front door. It was slightly open, just enough to notice. Just enough to send a cold rush through my entire body. Sophie, I said quietly. Stay in the car. Her eyes widened. What stay? I repeated more firmly. She didn't argue. I stepped out slowly, my senses sharpened, every movement deliberate. The house was silent. Too silent. I pushed the door open. It creaked, louder than it ever had before. Amy Lisa's voice called from inside, strained and uneven. Relief hit me, but only for a second, because when I stepped into the living room, I saw it. Everything was turned over. Drawers pulled out. Cushions on the floor. Cabinets left open like gaping mouths. Lisa stood near the kitchen, pale, her hands shaking. Oh my God, she whispered when she saw me. Amy, "Are you okay?" I asked quickly, scanning her for injuries. I think so," she stammered. "They were gone by the time I came down. I repeated. I heard something she said. Thought Ethan was up, but when I came out, her voice broke as she gestured around us. "This!" My heart pounded harder. "They were looking for something," I said. Lisa nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I know," she whispered, "and I think I know what." We didn't say it out loud. We didn't need to. The box, the phone, the truth. I moved quickly through the house, checking every room. Nothing seemed missing at first glance. Nothing obvious, anyway. But this wasn't about stealing valuables. This was targeted, precise. They had known where to look. They just hadn't found what they came for. When I returned to the living room, Lisa was sitting down now, her face buried in her hands. "I should have listened," she said quietly. "I should have listened to you." I didn't respond. Not yet. Because something else was wrong. "Where's Ethan?" I asked. Lisa looked up, her expression shifting again. "I don't know," she said. "He wasn't here when I woke up." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean he wasn't here? I mean, his room's empty," she said. "His phone's gone, his jacket too." My pulse spiked. He hadn't just left. He had run. Before I could say anything else, the front door opened again. Sophie stepped inside, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "What happened?" she asked, her voice small. "Someone broke in," Lisa said, standing quickly and pulling her into a hug. Sophie stiffened for a moment, then relaxed slightly. "They were looking for the box," she said quietly. Lisa pulled back, staring at her. "You knew?" she asked. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. I told Grandma everything, she admitted. Lisa's eyes flicked to me. For a brief second, I expected anger, but instead, there was something else. Relief. "Good," she said softly. "At least someone is being honest." That surprised me, more than anything else that morning. Before I could respond, my phone rang. "Daniel," I answered immediately. "Tell me you're okay," he said without preamble. "We are," I replied. "But the house was broken into." A pause. "Then I was afraid of that," he said. "They were looking for the box," I added. "Did they find it?" "No," I said. "I took it with me last night." "Good," he said. "That probably saved you more trouble than you realize." I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly feeling heavier. "What about the phone?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "We pulled something off it," he said. My heart skipped. "What kind of something?" "A recording," he replied. "Not complete, but enough." I closed my eyes briefly. "What does it say?" His voice lowered. "It's your husband," he said. "He's arguing with two men. Names come up, money, threats." My chest tightened. And there's a point where it gets physical," Daniel continued. "We hear a struggle. Then one of the men says something that changes everything." I held my breath. "What he says?" Daniel paused, as if weighing the impact of the words. "You should have kept your mouth shut, Graham. Nobody needed to know about the settlement." The world tilted. Settlement. The word echoed in my mind, connecting pieces I hadn't fully understood before, the documents, the money, the lies. "It wasn't just fraud," I whispered. "It was bigger." "Yes," Daniel said, "and there's more." I braced myself. "One of the voices, we ran it through what we have," he said. "We can't confirm yet, but it matches someone connected to the Hale family." My grip tightened on the phone. "Marcus, not Marcus," he replied. "Older, likely his father or uncle." A cold realization settled in. This wasn't new. This wasn't recent. This had been going on for decades. And now it had come full circle. Through Ethan, through my family. "What do we do?" I asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "We move forward," he said, "but carefully. We need more than just a partial recording. We need a direct link." "And how do we get that?" I asked. Another pause. Then, "We use what they want," he said. My stomach dropped. "The box," I said. "Yes," he confirmed. "If they're willing to break into your house for it, they'll come back, or they'll make contact. And you want to use that." "It might be the only way," he said. I glanced around the room, at Lisa, at Sophie, at the mess that used to be my safe place. "And Ethan?" I asked. Silence. "Then he might already be involved deeper than we thought," Daniel said carefully. "If they think he knows something, or if he has something they need," the implication hung there. Heavy. Dangerous. I swallowed hard. We have to find him, I said. We will, Daniel assured me. But right now you need to stay put. I'm sending someone to take a look at the house. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. All right. When the call ended, the silence in the room felt different. Not empty. Charged. Because now we knew. This wasn't just about uncovering the past. This was about surviving the present. And somewhere out there, my grandson was in the middle of it. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Even after Daniel sent an officer to walk through every room, take notes, and reassure us that nothing obvious was taken, the feeling lingered. It clung to the walls, to the furniture, to the air itself. Someone had been inside, looking, searching, and they hadn't been afraid. Lisa tried to clean up, moving from room to room with restless energy, but every drawer she closed only seemed to remind us how many had been opened. Sophie stayed close to me, quieter than usual, her eyes constantly drifting toward the windows. And Ethan, he was still gone. By noon, the tension had turned into something heavier. Worry. Real, undeniable worry. He wouldn't just disappear, Lisa said for the third time, pacing near the kitchen. Not without telling me. I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure that was true anymore. He left before the break-in, I said finally. That's not a coincidence. Lisa stopped pacing. You think he knew, she asked. I think he was scared, I replied. And I think he believed running would protect him. From Marcus? Sophie asked softly. From everything I said. Silence followed, because we all understood what that meant. Before we could say anything else, my phone buzzed again. Daniel. I answered immediately. We found him, he said. Relief hit me so hard I had to grab the edge of the counter. Where? Alive, he added quickly, as if he knew what my next question would be. But not exactly safe. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? He showed up at a gas station about 20 minutes outside the city, Daniel said. Looked shaken. Asked to use the phone. The clerk got suspicious and called it in. Is he hurt? Nothing serious, he said. But he's not talking much. I'm coming, I said. Amy, I'm coming, I repeated firmer this time. A pause. Then all right, Daniel said, but be careful. I hung up and turned to Lisa and Sophie. They found him, I said. Lisa's face drained of color. Where I told her. I'm going, I added. I'm coming too, she said immediately. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, but this was her son. And despite everything, she deserved to be there. Okay, I said, but Sophie stays here. No, Sophie said quickly. I'm not staying alone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. The fear, the determination. She'd already been pulled into this, whether we liked it or not. Fine, I said quietly, but you don't leave my side. She nodded. The drive felt longer than it should have. Every mile stretched out every second, dragging under the weight of what we might find when we got there. When we finally pulled into the gas station parking lot, I spotted the patrol car immediately. Daniel stood beside it, and a few feet away, Ethan. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in the way he held himself. His shoulders were slumped, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes fixed on the ground. For the first time since this began, he didn't look like someone trying to act tough. He looked like someone who had run out of options. Lisa was out of the car before I even turned off the engine. Ethan, she called, rushing toward him. He looked up. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Relief, then guilt. Mom, he said. She pulled him into a tight embrace. What were you thinking? She demanded, her voice breaking. You can't just disappear like that. He didn't hug her back right away, but he didn't pull away either. I didn't know what else to do, he said quietly. I stepped closer, Sophie beside me. Daniel gave me a brief nod. He showed up about an hour ago, he said. Wouldn't say much, just that he needed help. I turned my attention to Ethan. Start talking, I said. He flinched slightly at my tone, but he didn't argue. Not this time. They know, he said. The words landed heavy. Who, Lisa asked. Marcus, he replied, and his people. They know something's wrong. My chest tightened. How, I asked. He shook his head. I don't know, he said, but after I left, I got a call. From Marcus, I asked. He nodded. What did he say? Ethan hesitated. Then he asked me if I had the box. A cold chill ran through me, and I pressed. I told him no, Ethan said. But he didn't believe me. Of course he didn't, I muttered. He said if I was lying. Ethan's voice faltered slightly. He'd come looking for it himself. Lisa's grip on his arm tightened. What does that mean? She asked. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't try to soften the truth. It means he's not going to stop, he said. Silence followed, because there was nothing to argue with, nothing to deny. Daniel stepped forward slightly. Did he say anything else, he asked? Ethan nodded. He mentioned the phone, he said, asked if I still had it. My heart skipped. And what did you say I asked? I told him it was gone. Ethan replied that it broke. Daniel's expression darkened. That buys us some time, he said. Not much, but something. Ethan let out a shaky breath. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said, his voice low. I thought it was just easy money. I didn't know what I was getting into. I studied him carefully. This wasn't the same boy who had laughed at me. This wasn't the same voice filled with arrogance and dismissal. This was something else, something stripped down to the truth. And the box, I asked, did you know what it was? He shook his head. Not at first, he said, but after Marcus saw it, I figured it out. How? Sophie asked softly. Ethan glanced at her, then back at me. There were names, he said, dates, amounts, and then the recording. My pulse quickened. You listened to it. He nodded. Not all of it, he said, but enough. Enough for what I pressed. He swallowed. Enough to know that Grandpa didn't die by accident. The words hit harder than I expected. Even after everything I had seen, everything I had read, hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. Lisa stepped back slightly, her face pale. No, she whispered. That's not. It is, Ethan said quietly. She shook her head, tears forming. No, your grandfather, he was killed, Ethan said. Silence. Complete. Total. Even the distant sounds of traffic seemed to fade away. Because in that moment, everything we had been circling around finally came into focus. Not suspicion, not theory, truth. And once truth is spoken, there's no going back. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Then we finish this, I said. Ethan looked at me, confused. How, he asked. I met his gaze, my voice calm but unyielding. By making sure the people who did this don't get to hide behind it anymore. Daniel nodded beside me. That's exactly what we're going to do. Ethan hesitated, then asked the question that had been hanging over all of us. And if they come after us first, I didn't look away. Then we're ready, I said. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't just reacting, I was taking control. We didn't go straight home after that. Daniel insisted we follow him to the station just for a conversation, he said, but I knew better. Nothing about this was casual anymore. The building felt colder than usual when we stepped inside. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that pale, unforgiving glow that made it impossible to hide from anything, especially the truth. Ethan sat across from us in a small interview room, his hands folded tightly in front of him. Lisa sat beside him close enough to touch, but not quite reaching for him anymore. That distance said more than any words could. Sophie stayed next to me, silent, watchful, and me, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something final. Daniel closed the door behind us and took a seat across from Ethan. No one's under arrest, he said calmly, but we need clarity, and we need it now. Ethan nodded. He didn't argue, he didn't deflect, he just nodded. Start from the beginning, Daniel said. Ethan exhaled slowly like he was bracing himself. I met Marcus through a guy named Trevor, he began. At school. He said Marcus could get me into parties, help me make money. It sounded easy. Lisa let out a small, pained breath, but didn't interrupt. At first it was just deliveries, Ethan continued. Nothing big, just picking up envelopes, dropping off packages. Cash, no questions. And you didn't ask questions, Daniel pressed. Ethan shook his head. I didn't want to know, he admitted. That honesty, it cut deeper than any lie could have. What changed? I asked quietly. Ethan looked at me. The garage, he said. My chest tightened. Tell me. He swallowed. I went there with some friends one night, he said. We were just messing around, drinking, exploring. It's abandoned, so no one cares. I clenched my jaw. That place had once been part of Richard's life, his work, his routine. Now it was just a playground for kids who didn't understand what had been left behind. I found the box by accident, Ethan continued, behind some old equipment. It looked old, valuable maybe. So you took it, Daniel said. Ethan nodded. I thought I could sell it, he said. Make some quick cash, and instead you brought it to Marcus. I said yes. What happened then? Ethan's expression shifted. That same fear from before crept back in. He changed, Ethan said. The moment he saw it, he didn't even try to hide it. How so? Daniel asked. He got serious, Ethan said. Took it out of my hands, started going through everything. The papers, the receipts, like he knew exactly what he was looking at. And did he? I asked. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. He did. A heavy silence settled over the room. What did he say? Daniel asked. Ethan hesitated. Then he said I had no idea what I'd just found, he said. That this was old money. Old problems. And people would do anything to keep it buried. My pulse quickened. Did he mention names? Daniel asked. Ethan shook his head. Not at first, he said, but later. I heard him on the phone. With who? I asked. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But he was angry. Said something about the Graham files and how they were supposed to be gone. The room went still, completely still. Because for the first time, there it was. Out in the open, the connection. He knows who you are, Daniel said quietly. Ethan looked at him. And he knows who she is, Daniel added, nodding toward me. A cold wave washed over me. That's why he asked about your car, Sophie whispered. No one corrected her, because she was right. Lisa finally spoke, her voice trembling. So all of this, all of it, is because of something that happened years ago, yes, I said, and now it's happening again, Daniel added. Lisa looked between us, her expression breaking. I should have listened, she said. I should have seen it sooner. I should have stopped, I said firmly. She blinked at me. This isn't the time for that, I continued. We deal with what's in front of us. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. Ethan leaned back slightly, his voice quieter now. There's more, he said. Every muscle in my body tensed. What I asked. He looked down at his hands. Marcus didn't just want the box, he said. He wanted me to use your car. Why my car? Lisa asked. Ethan glanced at me. Because no one looks twice at an old woman driving around town, he said. The words hit harder than they should have, not because they weren't true, but because of how easily they had been used against me. I felt something shift inside me. Not hurt, not even anger. Something sharper, more focused. So he used you, I said, and you used me. Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded. I'm sorry, he said. And for the first time, it sounded real. But I didn't respond, not yet, because sorry didn't fix this. It didn't undo what had been set in motion. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Did Marcus ever mention the recording, he asked? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Then, yes, he said. After he went through the box, he started asking about it, said there should be something else, something that proved everything. The phone, I said. Ethan nodded. He knew it existed, he said. He just didn't know where it was. Daniel exchanged a look with me. That means we still have the advantage, he said. For now, I replied. Silence settled again, heavy, but different this time. Not confusion, not fear, clarity. Because we finally understood what we were dealing with. Daniel stood up. We move carefully from here, he said. No sudden moves, no direct confrontation. We let him think he still has control. And when he makes a move, I asked. Daniel's expression hardened. We're ready for it, he said. I nodded slowly, because this wasn't just about protecting Ethan anymore, or Lisa, or even Sophie. This was about finishing something Richard had started, something he had died trying to expose. I looked at Ethan, at the boy who had laughed at me just days ago, and now sat there shaken, exposed, and finally facing the consequences of everything he had tried to ignore. You don't get to run anymore, I said quietly. He looked up. I held his gaze. You stay. You face this, and you fix what you can. He nodded. I will, he said. I didn't say I believed him, because belief would have to be earned. Daniel opened the door. "Let's get you all home," he said. But as we stepped out into the hallway, I realized something. Home wasn't going to feel like home for a long time. Not until this was over. Not until the truth was no longer something hiding in shadows. And not until the people who had buried it were finally forced to face it. Daniel didn't let us go home alone. Protocol, he said, though the look in his eyes told me it was more than that. 2 patrol cars followed us at a distance, quiet and unobtrusive, but present enough to remind me that we were no longer just a family dealing with our own problems. We were part of something bigger now, something dangerous. The house looked different when we pulled up, cleaner than before. Lisa had done what she could, but still marked by what had happened. A drawer that didn't quite close, a picture frame slightly crooked on the wall, small things that whispered of intrusion, of violation. Ethan hesitated before stepping out of the car. For a brief second, I thought he might refuse to go inside, but then he squared his shoulders and followed us in. Daniel stayed with us, standing near the doorway as we gathered in the living room. He spoke quietly into his radio, then turned to face us. "Here's how this is going to work," he said. "We're going to set a controlled meet." Lisa frowned. A situation where Marcus believes he's getting what he wants. Daniel explained. The box, the documents, something he can't ignore. My stomach tightened. "You want to use me," I said. He didn't deny it. "You're the one he's watching," he said, "through Ethan, through your car, through everything that's happened so far. And if he realizes it's a setup," Lisa asked. Daniel's expression hardened. "Then we adapt," he said. "But right now, this is the best chance we have to catch him saying something we can use." I looked at the metal box sitting on the table. Richard's box, the one thing he had tried to keep safe. And now we were going to use it as bait. A strange mix of anger and resolve settled in my chest. "Fine," I said, "but we do it my way." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Your way? I'm not some helpless old woman he thinks he can scare," I said. "If we're doing this, I want him to see me, hear me, understand exactly what he's walking into." There was a brief silence. Then Daniel nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll work with that." Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside Lisa. "You don't understand," he said. "Marcus isn't just going to walk into a trap. He's careful." "Everyone makes mistakes," Daniel replied, "especially when they think they're in control." Ethan didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. That alone told me how much had changed. Daniel pulled out his phone and checked something. "We're setting the meet for tonight," he said. Lisa's head snapped up. "Tonight." "Yes," he said. "We don't want to give him time to regroup. If he suspects the box is back in play, he'll move fast." My pulse quickened. Tonight. Everything was moving faster than I had expected. Where, I asked. "A parking lot just outside town," Daniel said. "Old, mostly empty. Good visibility. Easy to control." Ethan's face went pale. "I know that place," he said quietly. "Of course you do," Daniel replied. "That's why it'll work." The room fell silent again. Because we all understood what this meant. This wasn't just a plan. This was a confrontation, and there was no guarantee how it would end. The hours leading up to it passed in a blur. Daniel left to coordinate with his team, promising to return before the meet. In the meantime, we were told to stay inside, keep the box visible, and wait. Waiting turned out to be the hardest part. Lisa tried to keep busy, pacing from room to room, checking and rechecking things that didn't need checking. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't taken a single sip from. And Ethan, he stayed quiet, unusually quiet. At one point, I found him standing by the window, staring out at the street like he was expecting something or someone to appear. Thinking about running again, I asked. He flinched slightly, but didn't turn around. "No," he said. "Good," I replied, a pause. Then he spoke again. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't respond immediately. I know that doesn't fix anything, he added. But I need you to know, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I studied him for a moment. "You meant to take my car," I said. He nodded. "You meant to lie," I continued. Another nod. "You meant to ignore what you were getting involved in." He swallowed. "Yes." I stepped closer. "But you didn't mean to put this family in danger," I finished. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. No, he said quietly. I didn't. I held his gaze for a long moment, then I nodded once. That's the only reason you're still standing here, I said. He didn't argue. He didn't try to defend himself. He just accepted it. And somehow, that mattered more than anything he could have said. By the time Daniel returned, the sun had already set. The house felt smaller in the dark, more fragile. Everything's ready, he said as he stepped inside. We move in 30 minutes. Lisa's hands tightened around each other. I don't like this, she said. None of us do, Daniel replied. But this is how we end it. I picked up the metal box. It felt heavier now, not physically, but in what it represented. Richard's truth, our past, everything that had been buried. Let's go, I said. The drive to the meeting point was silent. No music, no small talk, just the sound of the engine and the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. Daniel's car led the way, followed by an unmarked vehicle I knew carried backup. We pulled into the parking lot just after 9 p.m. It was exactly as Daniel had described, empty, open, exposed. A few dim lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Perfect. I stepped out of the car, the box in my hands, and looked around. This is it, Daniel said quietly. He'll be here. Ethan stayed close behind me, his movements tense. Lisa and Sophie remained near the car exactly where Daniel had instructed. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Then headlights, approaching slowly from the far end of the lot. My breath caught. This is him, Ethan whispered. The car rolled to a stop a short distance away. The engine cut. Silence. Then the door opened. Marcus Hale stepped out. He looked exactly like I expected. Confident, relaxed, like he already believed he had won. His eyes landed on me immediately, then on the box in my hands. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, he said, his voice carrying easily across the empty space. I was wondering how long it would take. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stood there, meeting his gaze. Because this moment, this confrontation, wasn't just about him. It was about everything that had led us here. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew something he didn't. This wasn't his game anymore. Marcus didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed. He stepped away from his car like he had all the time in the world, closing the door with a quiet click, his eyes never leaving mine. There was no urgency in his movements, no visible concern about the open space around us, the shadows that could easily hide more than just darkness. He thought he was in control. That made him dangerous, but it also made him predictable. Well, he said, tilting his head slightly, you going to stand there all night, or are we going to have a conversation? I tightened my grip on the metal box but didn't move closer. You seem very comfortable, I replied evenly. For someone who just broke into my house. A flicker crossed his face so quick most people would have missed it, but I didn't. Then he smiled again. I don't know what you're talking about, he said lightly. I've been waiting for this all day. Of course he had. I took a slow step forward. Then let's not waste time, I said. You wanted this. I lifted the box slightly. His eyes followed the movement immediately. That told me everything I needed to know. Yes, he said. I did. Behind me, I could feel Ethan tense. I didn't turn around. Funny, I continued, my voice steady, because from what I understand, this was supposed to be gone years ago. Marcus let out a small laugh. Things have a way of resurfacing, he said, especially when people don't know what they're holding. I know exactly what I'm holding, I replied. That got his attention. The smile didn't disappear, but it sharpened. Oh, he said. And what is that exactly? The truth, I said, silence, for just a second. But it was enough, because in that moment something shifted, not in me, in him. The confidence was still there, but beneath it, calculation. He was reassessing. Good. You're a lot more involved than I expected, he said slowly. I didn't have much of a choice, I replied. Your people made sure of that. He shrugged slightly. Collateral damage, he said, nothing personal. Something cold settled deep in my chest. Everything about this is personal, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Careful, he said. You don't want to start saying things you can't take back. I met his gaze. I think that applies more to you than it does to me. For the first time since he stepped out of that car, the smile faded. Not completely, but enough. What do you want? He asked. Finally, we were getting somewhere. I want to know why my husband died, I said. The words landed harder than I expected, not because of how they sounded, but because of how they felt. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me, carefully, like he was deciding how much to reveal. Accidents happen, he said finally. I shook my head. No, I said. They don't. Not like that. He sighed, almost bored. You're digging into something you don't understand, he said. Something that was settled a long time ago. Settled, I repeated. Is that what you call it? His expression hardened slightly. That's exactly what I call it, he said. Behind me, I heard Ethan shift. Marcus, he started. Not now. Marcus snapped, not even looking at him. That told me something too. Ethan wasn't just a pawn. He was a liability. And Marcus knew it. Let him speak, I said. Marcus's eyes flicked back to me. This doesn't concern him anymore, he said. It never concerned him in the first place, I replied. You made it his problem. A brief silence. Then you're right, Marcus said. I did. The admission hung in the air, simple, casual, like it meant nothing, but it meant everything. Why, I asked. Because he was useful. Marcus said because he had access. Because he didn't ask questions. Ethan flinched. I felt it without even looking, and now I pressed. Marcus shrugged. Now he's standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said. A chill ran through me. That sounds familiar, I said. His gaze sharpened. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said slowly, that I've heard that line before. I took another step forward, closing the distance. Not enough to be reckless, but enough to make it clear I wasn't backing down. On a recording, I added. That did it. For the first time, Marcus's composure cracked. Not completely, but enough. His shoulders stiffened, his eyes narrowing in a way that wasn't just irritation anymore. It was recognition. What recording, he asked. But the question came too fast, too sharp. He already knew. You know exactly which one, I said. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Behind me, I could feel the tension building, Daniel, his team, all waiting for the right moment. But we weren't there yet. Not quite. You should have kept your mouth shut, Graham, I said, quietly, repeating the words from the recording. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink, but something in his expression changed. And that was all I needed. You remember saying that, I asked? A long pause. Then you're playing a dangerous game, he said. I'm finishing one, I replied. His jaw tightened. You think that recording proves something he said. You think a few words are enough to bring everything down. No, I said. I think they're enough to start. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Marcus let out a slow breath. You have no idea how deep this goes, he said. No idea who you're dealing with. Then tell me, I said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't get to ask questions, he said. You get to make a choice. What kind of choice? He nodded toward the box. You give me that, he said. And we all walk away. My grip tightened, and if I don't? His eyes darkened. Then this doesn't end here, he said. A threat, clear, direct, and exactly what Daniel needed. I held his gaze. Steady, unshaken. No, I said, just one word. But it carried everything. Marcus's expression hardened completely now, the last trace of that easy confidence disappearing. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe I replied, but it's mine to make. A beat. Then you really think they can protect you? He asked, his voice lower now. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because in that moment, everything shifted. Daniel stepped forward. Actually, he said calmly, we can. Marcus's head snapped toward him, and for the first time since this began, the balance changed. Completely. For a moment, no one moved. Marcus stood frozen between the headlights and the dim overhead lamps, his eyes locked on Daniel as if recalculating every step that had led him here. The confidence that had once wrapped around him like armor was still there, but cracked, now fractured in ways he couldn't hide. "You've got to be kidding me," Marcus said, his voice low, controlled. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "It's over, Marcus," he said calmly. "You've said enough." Marcus let out a short laugh, but it didn't carry the same weight as before. "You think this is enough?" he asked. "You think a few words in a parking lot are going to stick behind him?" Two unmarked cars slowly rolled forward, headlights cutting through the darkness. Doors opened. Officers stepped out, not rushing, not dramatic, just steady and deliberate. A net tightening. Marcus saw it. Of course he did. His jaw clenched, his posture shifting, not panicked but alert, like someone who had spent years avoiding situations exactly like this. "You set me up," he said, glancing back at me. I met his gaze without hesitation. "No," I replied. "You walked into this all by yourself." For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but something close. "You don't know what you've started," he said. "I do," I answered quietly, "and I'm finishing it." Daniel stepped closer. "Turn around," he said. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus didn't move. Not immediately. Instead, he looked past Daniel, toward Ethan. That moment, brief as it was, felt heavier than anything else that night. Because there was something there, something unfinished. "You should have stayed out of it," Marcus said to him. Ethan swallowed hard, his shoulders tightening. "I tried," he said. Marcus's expression hardened. "No," he replied. "You didn't." For a second, I thought Ethan might step forward, might say something else, but he didn't. He stayed where he was, and that was enough. "Last chance," Daniel said firmly. "Hands up." Marcus exhaled slowly. Then finally he raised his hands. The tension in the air shifted instantly. Officers moved in quick, controlled practice. They secured him, read his rights, and within moments the man who had carried himself like he owned the night was standing there in handcuffs. Contained, but not finished. Because as they led him toward the car, he looked back at me one last time. "This doesn't end with me," he said. The words lingered, a warning, a promise, or maybe just a final attempt to hold on to power he no longer had. Either way, I didn't respond. Because for the first time, I didn't need to. The ride back felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but clearer. Like something that had been building for years had finally broken open, and there was no putting it back together the way it had been. Lisa sat quietly beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sophie leaned against the window, her eyes closed, but not asleep. And Ethan, he didn't say a word. Not until we reached the house. We stood in the driveway for a moment, no one quite ready to go inside. It wasn't fear. Not anymore. It was something else. The weight of everything that had just happened. The understanding that this wasn't really over. Not completely, but that something had changed in a way that couldn't be undone. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said suddenly. We all looked at him. His voice was steady, but quiet. "I didn't tell you everything," before he said. A small knot tightened in my chest. "Go on," I said. He took a breath. "Marcus wasn't the one who started it," he said. "Not really." Daniel, who had just stepped out of his car behind us, paused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Ethan looked down for a second, then back up. "The recording," he said. There were two voices arguing with Grandpa. Marcus wasn't one of them. I felt my stomach drop. "We know that," Daniel said. "We believe one of them was connected to Marcus's family." Ethan shook his head. "It was more than that," he said. "Marcus told me once. When he thought I wasn't paying attention. What did he say?" I asked. Ethan hesitated. Then he said his family didn't just cover things up, he said. They benefited from it. Big money. Settlement money that never made it to the people it was meant for. My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the car. "That matches what we found," Daniel said. Ethan nodded. "But there's more," he added. Silence fell again. Because somehow, we all knew this wasn't the end. Marcus said someone else was involved back then, Ethan continued. Someone higher up. Someone who made sure everything stayed buried. Daniel's expression darkened. "A name?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "No," he said. but he said they were still around, still connected. A cold wave washed over me. This wasn't just about closing a chapter. There were still pages missing. Then we keep going, I said. Everyone looked at me. Until we find them, I added. Daniel studied me for a moment, then nodded. We will, he said. The days that followed were quieter, but not peaceful. There were interviews, statements, long conversations with people who had once worked at the garage, people who had stayed silent for years out of fear or loyalty or both. The recording was analyzed, the documents were reviewed, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth came together. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to reopen what had been buried. Enough to give Richard's story a voice again. And Ethan, he stayed. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He faced it. Every question, every consequence, not perfectly, but honestly. And for the first time in a long time, that mattered. One evening, a few weeks later, I stood in the driveway again, the same spot where everything had begun. My car sat there repaired now, clean, polished, whole. I ran my hand along the side, feeling the familiar curve beneath my fingers. It wasn't just a car anymore. It never really had been. It was everything that had led me here, everything I had lost, and everything I had refused to let go of. Ethan stepped out of the house behind me. He hesitated, then walked over. Hey, he said quietly. I didn't turn right away. Yes, I got a job, he said, at a garage. One of the guys Daniel knows. That made me pause. I looked at him. Doing what? Learning, he said, starting from the bottom. I studied his face. There was no smirk, no arrogance, just effort. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he added quickly. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. A long silence followed. Then I nodded. Good, I said, that was all, but it was enough. Because forgiveness wasn't something you said. It was something you earned, and for the first time, he had taken a step toward it. A few months passed before the house felt like mine again. Not because the memory of what happened faded, it didn't. Some things don't fade, they settle. They become part of the walls, the quiet spaces between conversations, the moments when you catch yourself staring a little longer than usual. But something else replaced the fear, clarity, and something even stronger than that, control. The first real sign of it came on a cool morning in early fall. I stood in the driveway, keys in hand, looking at my car. The same silver Buick Richard and I had chosen together years ago. The same car Ethan had taken from me like it meant nothing. Now it meant everything again. I opened the door, slowly sat down, and rested my hands on the steering wheel. For a moment, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, breathing, remembering. And then I turned the key. The engine came to life, steady, familiar. Mine, not borrowed, not taken. Mine. That mattered more than I ever thought it would. Life didn't go back to the way it was. It moved forward, differently. Lisa started therapy. At first she resisted it, said she didn't need it, that she could handle things on her own. But something about everything that happened, the break-in, the confrontation, the realization of how much she had ignored, finally broke through. She stopped pretending, and that was the beginning. Sophie went with her sometimes, not because she had to, because she wanted to. That told me more about her than anything else. She wasn't running from what happened. She was facing it, quietly, bravely. And Ethan, he changed. Not overnight, not in some dramatic, perfect way, but slowly, consistently. He showed up every day, at the garage, at home, in conversations he used to avoid. The first time he knocked on my door, instead of just walking in, I noticed. The first time he asked, "Can I borrow the car?" instead of taking it, I noticed that too. And the first time I said no, he nodded. Didn't argue, didn't push, just said okay. That was the moment I knew something had shifted for real, not because he got what he wanted, but because he accepted what he didn't. Respect. It had finally found its way back. The case didn't end as quickly as I might have hoped. Marcus talked, eventually. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The evidence built up around him piece by piece. The recording, the documents, the testimonies from people who had stayed silent for years and finally found the courage to speak. And behind it all, the truth about Richard. Not everything was clean. Not everything was easy to prove, but enough came to light to change the story that had been told for so long. It wasn't just an accident, it was a chain of decisions. Greed, fear, silence, and people who believed they could bury the consequences. They were wrong. For the first time in years, Richard wasn't just a memory. He was a voice again, and that meant more than any verdict ever could. One afternoon, I took a drive. Not to run errands, not because I had somewhere to be, but because I wanted to. The road stretched out in front of me, lined with trees just beginning to turn. The air was crisp, the sky clear. It reminded me of the drives Richard and I used to take. No destination, no rush, just movement. I turned onto a quiet road just outside the city, the kind of place where time seems to slow down without asking permission. And eventually, I stopped. There was a small clearing there, nothing special to anyone else, but to me, it felt right. I stepped out of the car carrying the small urn I had brought with me. Richard had always liked places like this, quiet, open, honest. I walked a few steps forward and stood there looking out at nothing in particular. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I didn't know where to begin. But then, I did. "They know now," I said softly. My voice sounded different out here, lighter, stronger. "I didn't understand it back then," I continued. "What you were trying to do, what you were carrying." I paused, taking a breath. "But I do now." The wind moved gently through the trees. A quiet answer. "I wish you had told me," I added. "I wish you hadn't tried to handle it alone. That part still hurt. Maybe it always would. But I get why you didn't," I said. "You were trying to protect us." I looked down at the urn in my hands, and now it's my turn. I stepped forward and carefully opened it. The moment felt heavier than I expected. Not sad, not exactly, just final. I let the ashes drift into the air, carried by the wind across the open space. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle. Not closure, something deeper than that. Peace. When I got back home, Ethan was in the driveway, working on an old engine, grease on his hands, focus in his eyes. He looked up when I pulled in. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. I got out of the car and watched him for a moment. "You're getting better at that," I said. He shrugged, a small smile forming. Still a lot to learn, he admitted. "That's how it's supposed to be," I said. He nodded, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead." He wiped his hands on a rag, then looked at me. "Do you think—" He paused. "Do you think Grandpa would have been proud of me if I'd done things differently?" The question hung there, heavy, honest. I stepped closer. "He would have wanted you to try," I said. "That's what matters." Ethan nodded slowly. "I am trying," he said. "I know," I replied. And this time, I meant it. That night, I sat in my living room again. The same chair, the same quiet. But everything felt different, because I wasn't sitting there wondering what was happening anymore. I knew. And more importantly, I had chosen how to respond to it. Family doesn't always look the way we expect it to. It doesn't always feel safe or fair or easy. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes it hurts you in ways you never thought possible. But that doesn't mean you let it destroy you or itself. Love isn't blind, it isn't silent, and it isn't about protecting people from consequences. It's about standing firm, setting boundaries, and refusing to let the people you care about lose themselves, even if it means standing against them. I looked around my home, really looked at it, at what it was, at what it had become, and I realized something simple. I hadn't lost everything. I had found something stronger, my voice, my strength, and the courage to use both. And this time, no one was taking that away from me. Some of the hardest truths in life don't come from strangers. They come from the people we love the most, the ones we trust, the ones we believe would never cross a line until they do. But here's what I've learned. Love doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean looking away when something feels wrong, and it definitely doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you just because they're family. Real love has boundaries. It has courage. It has the strength to say no when yes would be easier. And sometimes it means standing alone just long enough for the truth to catch up. If you've ever been in a situation where someone you love crossed a line, what did you do? Did you speak up? Or did you stay silent? I'd really like to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because stories like this, they're not just stories, they're reminders that it's never too late to take your life back.